Frank stammered. Didn't check. I didn't even see this until now. I was, using my voice mic at the time and oh crap. I was speaking in English and Swedish. The translator was probably catching up with my words and translated everything as best it could. Yelena laughed. And don't forget you mumble and eat your words, and you had the sun in your eyes, or the wind was on your mic. Frank also laughed. Yeah, I'm an asshole, but why didn't you ever return my messages? Yelena looked down, suddenly finding the grass beneath them interesting. I was angry. I read the last message on our home comm, and that short note just made me burn. I thought you left such a flippant note, then never replied to my messages. Frank took her in his arms and looked into her deep green eyes. I was on my ship. It doesn't take unsecured messages. You know we spend most of our time in slip space. By the time I had read them, I had tried to contact you, but you weren't answering any of my messages. I transferred out of the L-Ind fleet to the diplomatic corps just to find out why. Yelena smiled and took his grizzled bearded face in her hands. Franklin Johansson, are you, what was that old term? Simping for me? Frank drew her close and kissed her full on her lips. Bite your tongue, woman. I'm only trying to win back my heart. He kissed her again. We have wasted too much time over my mistake. Can we start over? Yelena stepped back and put out her hand. Hi, my name is Yelena Abramovich, Terran Diplomatic Corps, representative to the Fey Empire. And you are? Frank chuckled, shook her hand. Franklin Johansson, Terran Diplomatic Corps Security, asshole. Yelena laughed and kissed him softly. I'm sorry I never answered. He kissed her back. I'm sorry I never checked the sending address. She took his hand and they both looked at the setting sun, her blonde hair looking almost aflame in its light. Yelena said, you know, I like this world. This is what Terra must have looked like. So beautiful, so peaceful. Frank put his hand under her chin gently. It's an empty rock compared to you. Yelena wrinkled her nose and laughed. Oh God, do you think that line really works? Frank kissed her deeply. No, but it made you laugh. She kissed him back passionately. He gently laid her down. The Fey scout screamed in excitement. They're fighting. They're fighting. The rest of the Fey troops activated their optics and squinted. The Death Worlders were wrestling vigorously. The larger, hairier male had pinned the smaller female to the ground and both were tearing at their coverings. The smaller female drawing blood as she clawed the male's back. The Fey cheered at the sight. The communications officer yelled out, bio-bombs detonating in less than 10 minutes, prepare for impact. Use protective gear. The Fey troops hastily donned gas masks and protective gear and continued to cheer the fighting Death Worlders. Some even felt a little pity for them, not even knowing the horror soon to be unleashed on them. Other Fey troops cheered even louder as the female flipped the male over and was driving him into the ground, violently using her hips and hands to press him further into it, sweat pouring from both their exertions. This was violence incarnate. Death Worlders were truly a horror to behold. The male suddenly grabbed a female and pinned her yet again. He leaned his full weight on top of her and was biting and licking her neck. The female looked like she was in the most terrible pain. This was terror incarnate, their worst nightmares made real. He roared as she screamed the most horrible scream the Fae ever heard. Their bio-bombs detonated then, a few meters above the now exhausted Death Worlders. The Fae watched and waited for the death spasms to happen, as they had seen too often when one of their people had breathed the spores. A sweaty Frank heard the distant pops above them and looked up. An equally sweaty Yelena looked up as well, the fading sunlight still bright enough to see. "What the hell?" said Frank. "Are those rose petals?" Yelena pulled herself up and giggled. "I think the Fae have been taking lessons in cheesy romantic moves from you." Frank pulled her close and kissed her. "I think that scream of yours must have terrified them so bad they are halfway across the planet by now. I think I'm deaf in one ear." She laughed and pulled him closer, slowly running a rose petal across his broad chest. "So," she smiled naughtily, "round two." Frank laughed and pulled her close. The Fae army gaped in stunned silence. The scout looked at the commander, confusion and fear obvious even behind his mask. "Sir, the Death Worlders still live. Our most toxic poison has no effect. They are still wrestling on the poison field." "Wah, wah, what kind of monsters are they?" The Fae commander took one last look at the Death Worlders on his optics and grimly nodded. "They are wrestling in the widest field of poison ever seen by our empire. By the Queen, they are enjoying the smell of the poison. What madness is this? Tell the Queen to send terms of surrender. We cannot win against these monsters." He spoke quietly in silent terror. In the distance, more roars from the Death Worlders could be heard. The commander pressed his upper forelimbs against his head and ordered his troops to retreat into the safety of their capital, no longer able to bear witness to such madness. Exactly 1 year later, a peace treaty had been signed with the Fae. And in the cultural exchange program, the Terrans had created a list of contraband items that were not to be allowed on planet under penalty of stiff fines and long prison terms. Among these were roses and any relative of rose plants. Dogs and other household pets were kept in designated zones, allowing for little or no contact with the Fae. All effort was to be made to leave a minimal carbon footprint on the planet, so as not to affect it in any significant way. The Fae in turn understood the mistake that had started the whole war and promptly redesigned and rebuilt their trading centers in record time with the help of Terran technology to look less like what Terrans used to refer to as fire hydrants. Frank and Yelena stayed on planet, helping oversee the cultural exchange program and ensure both Terrans and Fae could coexist in this new world. Their newborn daughter was named after the planet's new designation, Eden. And, if anybody ever asks the Johanssons about what they did to change the minds of the Fae, they just look at each other, grin, and look at their daughter with an ever-widening smile of joy and well-kept secrets. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description.